everyone. I wish I were addressing you all in person, but the dramatic spread of COVID-19 has disrupted lives, livelihoods, communities, and businesses worldwide, creating the new normal that is so talked about. Architecture can shape lives, to affect the environment, to transform the imagination, and to inspire great feats of human achievement. It is not merely the act of designing an edifice, but also about engineering the lives that will eventually function within them. From structure and processes to materials and aesthetics, today architecture demands greater inventiveness while being mindful of the environment as well as the cultural context within which each building exists. As environments evolve and change the shape of living by the minute, it demands A&D fraternity to formulate new ways to harness and challenge that change. Nonetheless, the world's leading architects and designers created on the classic principle of brand building are not only moving with change, but are also creating the change. Influencing rather than being influenced, acting rather than reacting, evolving rather than stationary. Hence, today, we at ET Edge bring to you the Times of India's Design Next Legacy Forward, where industry veterans and next-gen architects discussing their ideologies to help bridge the gap between brands, ever-changing brands, requirements of the industry, and how brands can further catalyze this metamorphosis through thought-provoking discussions. Without further ado, I would now move on to our second podcast, Trending Now, Buildings of Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, featuring no introduction required, Hafiz Contractor, founder, HCA, Sonali Rastogi, co-founder, Morphogenesis, Abha Naren Lamba, principal architect, Abha Naren Lamba Associates, Rahul Kadri, partner and principal architect, IMK Architects, Ankur Choksi, principal, Studio Lotus, who will be in conversation with the very dashing Debin Moza, Executive Director, Head of Project Management Services, Knight Frank, India. Over to you, Debin.
Thanks, Shirley. Firstly, I'm privileged to be moderating this panel discussion, and I'm sure the wealth of experience all the panelists bring to the table will have an interesting discussion and some great takeaways for the audience. I'll kick off the discussion asking questions that draw out some of high-level themes and ideas we should be thinking about for approximately 50 minutes. Then we'll open up the chat box for 10 minutes for a Q&A and give you opportunity to ask specific questions that you've been thinking about to navigate your business and to be successful in your business. Sounds good? So great, let's start with the discussion. Today's architecture is the effect of thinking in less or more distant past about the future shape and operations of a building or fragment of a city. Thus, an architect's work means thinking about the future, about would-be forms of building and their detailed postulated manners of using them and their relation with the surroundings, about aesthetic values and climate of places under design. As we try to understand the role of architecture post-pandemic, we have to first better understand the way we inhabit the buildings and move through spaces. So my first question is to Hafiz. How do you see, you've seen the evolution of architecture from 20 years to present and future. How do you see that transformation happening? And what are the influencing factors of that transformation?
Okay, if you are going to ask that, what is the transformation from 20 years before and today? That transformation, is known to everyone. And I always have done what I felt was the necessity. But today, I really feel that the way we were looking at architecture 20 years back, or when I started my practice, and today the way I'm looking at architecture is completely different. Today, we never had something like, we were just thinking about buildings and how it can satisfy the requirement of the people and the client. But today there is a much, much bigger, you can say the client or the world demands a different kind of attention. And that I would say that whatever we are doing today, whether a small building or a big building or a city or a small township, today we have to think about climate change. And when I'm talking about climate change, it's very, very important that as an architect in a country like ours, we have to be thinking about climate change and architecture much more seriously than other countries who can build in the way they have been building in the past, but in a slightly different way. Why I am saying that we in our country should think about it more, because as you know, as population, our population is one of the highest in the world, and to the land, to the people occupying that much land, also the ratio is one of the highest. Now, why I am saying that design and architecture for us is more important as an Indian architect is finally, when we are talking about climate change, okay, we are talking about land, the way we are using land. And if you look at India, the amount of land that we have in urban area, we have one of the highest percentage of urban area in the world. We have something like, 7% of our land is in urban area, where in most of the other cities, it is 3 and 4%. Our agriculture is round about 51. What I'm trying to say, that from one side, we have to increase our green cover, our forest cover, which, is around about 33. And we have to come up by 10% more. That's what we have promised also. So finally, what it comes to, how we are going to build our cities. We are just royally just making new cities, new cities, new cities. We as architects have to think about how not to make new cities, but how to transform and recreate and reformulate our existing cities. We have to focus more on urban renewals. We have to think about how we are going to make more dense cities. And that is what is the new design going to be. When we are talking about the way we are designing the buildings, the aesthetics. Aesthetics are an outcome of the requirement and the construction materials. We have to look at new materials. The way we have been using our old materials, we have to forget about it, because India, as you know, the scarcity of materials, sand, cement. In another 20 years, you're going to have no limestone mines in India. We won't have cement. So from where are you going to get cement? Are you going to import and do it? What now? These are the questions that has to be answered, and which will lead to finally how you are going to make your new urban areas. And I feel that with our population going more and more and more, we will go to say 1.5 and 1.6. People say that the population is going to get restricted. I don't think so. Where are you going to grow more food? We don't have that much of capacity, and we are not growing so much food as per acre as all other nations. So food securities, water securities, and if we are going to build the way we are building in the past, that is, making ground and one upper and making row houses and those kind of things, those kind of building permits should be abolished. We have been always talking about how we can use the land and how much you can build on it. The law should change that land. If you are taking a land, you should build this much considering the whole population. Because if you look at it from another point of view, the amount of people that still don't have houses in India. If you look at how many people are living in slums in Mumbai, how many in Delhi. And if you look at it, it's something like so many million people are living in slums. Now, all of them also will come up in a building. Are you going to make them in ground in 3 upper, 4 upper, 5 upper? I see that the new urban areas are going to be completely different. They are going to be more intense, dense, because that's how, our transportation should be. I'm saying, if I was cars should be abolished. We are talking about electric cars. Yes, if you are in a building, we can have electrical system for transportation, vertical, horizontal. So denser cities, lesser roads, more green area, and no fossil fuel. That is what I look at. Yes, we can keep on talking, but other people also should talk. So that's my little bit of a, okay, now you can take it over and ask any more questions if you want.
Okay, so do you see, the whole concept of designing in terms of the cities and or the master planning of the cities changing post-pandemic? Is that an alarm that we should, look at something which gives more open spaces? You spoke about green areas, and also is it an alarm we should sort of start thinking about?
Yes. Okay, now when we are talking about post-pandemic, as soon as we had this thing started, the first 2 months was completely different. We all were cooped inside the house. So we started a new movement. I took all my old plans and I said, oh, we are doing all this thing in a rubbish manner. So wherever, what I felt that I would say something like zero waste architecture. As far as zero waste architecture is concerned, whichever buildings there we were doing, say a lack of flats or say 100 flats, we revised the way how we can plan and how we can design, where instead of a lack of flats, we could give 10% more or 15% more. We made the structure. We started designing the structure also in a much more economic manner. We designed it, about 15% cheaper. What I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to, boast about, 10% more and 15% cheaper. Why I'm saying that this is the way of designing, because you have to make your resources most absolutely in the focused manner, that you use your resources in the most appropriate manner. You don't have the latitude of wasting. That's where the global footprint comes up. We cannot waste a single square foot or a single square. So if we can save everyone, each and every architect can do 10% more flats and save 10% or 15% of the cost, that is the steel, cement, everything. Just imagine in the next 20 years, we will be able to house more people, and that is our need. If our prime minister is saying 5 trillion economy, okay, I say that we cannot reach 5 trillion economy because 50% of our people are disabled. When they're staying in slums, when they have to think about going to a toilet and stand in the queue, and the lady of the house has to think about water in the morning, is it a population? It's something, there's I'm sorry to say, that there is a crippled child in your house. That's never going to be produced. So this is our country. We have, made our country, we have crippled people. When I say crippled people, they are of no use. When we are talking about infrastructure, people talk about infrastructure, people talk about roads, and people talk. I say housing is the biggest infrastructure. And if we cannot put our emphasis on housing, our country is doomed. And we have to think about housing. Housing is the most important thing, because then and then everyone can produce. Then and then one will be producing in the office. We say, oh, why is that guy not come? He's got loose motions. Why is this guy? He's got conjunctivitis. Why is this guy? It's because, we are not 90% of 50% of our people are not living in a proper hygienic manner, hygienic places. Now, these are things that one has to talk about, and that is the new design. And that is the new aesthetic. The new aesthetic is not a single inch or not a single line is drawn just for the effect. The effect is what is necessary, and that is the new design mantra. And I feel if we do not follow that, we are going to lead our future generation into problem. We will lead our life and go away. I don't know about the age of every one of you, okay? But I think in that manner. So we have to think about the future kids. There's a very nice saying now that you haven't inherited this world from your grandfather. You have taken it on loan from your kids. And that is what we should think about, okay?
Thank you. Sonali, your views on the future cities and future buildings.
So I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 apparently disconnected points, but in the early parts of the pandemic, where there was a little bit more time available, and I'm glued to the television, looking at statistics at one level, and looking at the reverse migration. And the reverse migration is something that impacted me deeply. A lot of the interviews that I saw on television was that these were construction workers. And these were construction workers returning from these urbanized or these trying to be super urbanized areas, these high density areas which are growing in our country. And they were walking home 20 days, 30 days, daughters carrying sick fathers on their backs. And they were, and then a couple of months later, I saw many interviews of the reluctance to come back. And these, in some way, are people who have given life to, at a personal level, as an architect, as a professional, they've given life to my vision, and their state got me thinking of a lot of ideas that have been shared on platforms like this over the years. And one of those has been about decentralized growth. So why is it that all growth needs to be, even, for example, manufacturing? The headquarters of manufacturing lands up being in the center of our cities. Therefore, the manufacturing is just an hour or 2 outside. Like, why is it not where the workforce is available? So I would strongly, I'm more convinced than ever that we need a nationwide decentralized growth plan. So now that comes to another aspect in which I have started thinking about sustainability. So, morphogenesis has had its core, and whatever modicum of little bit of success we've had based around our practice of sustainability. But I feel that sustainability hasn't done enough because we've been thinking metrics, numbers, buildings. For me, this is also 25 years since I've been practicing as an architect. For me, the next phase of my life is to think about the people who build the buildings and the livability of people who build the buildings. And, even compared to many places around the world, the cost of our buildings is much cheaper because of the almost inhuman conditions in which our site labor lives. And so I thought about the fact that it's time to think about a much more mechanized construction methodology, not to disenfranchise those that carry the bricks on their head while their kids are on a cloth cradle on the side, not to disenfranchise those. But if we need to build in these urban centers, we need to not have families broken apart, visiting fathers, visiting children once a year. And in situations like today, having 20 days of walking to do. So I thought about the fact that whilst we are growing our cities as architects, the people who are building those cities are breaking apart the Indian family structure. Then we talk about the fact of crime that exists when people start to live outside family structures. crime does grow. Their children grow up without one or both parents missing. So the Indian ethos, the sustainability of our cultural values, I think somewhere our rapidly urbanizing cities are responsible for this. And so I think how our buildings are built, the level of mechanization, decentralized growth, where at least you go to the nearest growth node to work. And you're at least able to, like everywhere else in the world, at least be with your family over a weekend or once a week. You're at least able to be there on important family occasions. And that's how you build a nation of people that identify with the nation. Otherwise, where is the Indianness of these people who are living away from their families? So only, I mean, I guess I may have thought about this otherwise, but because these are the people who build my buildings, so it came very close to my heart. So my mantra of sustainability is added this human aspect of sustainability to it, rather than perhaps my focus in the past, which has been on metrics, energy. Not that becomes irrelevant. That is even more relevant than ever. But the human aspect has become more poignant in my thought process during the lockdown.
Thank you. I'll quickly move to Abha. I think she's got a hard stop at 5. Abha, we're talking about future. Do you think our heritage and modern buildings can coexist? We're talking about creating denser cities, or but we have so much heritage in our cities, and in the process of urbanization or creating modern cities, we are even compromising or neglecting the heritage part. So you are a conservation expert. How do you see that the past and the future can coexist?
Well, I think in the last 20 years as a country, we have been completely in the throes of not, I wouldn't say, a kind of a consumerism, a kind of, this biggest, and how fast and how large can you make projects. And I think the concerns that Hafiz shared today, these are the concerns I had even 20 years ago. And that's the reason as after being an architect, I decided that I'm going to focus more in conservation, because in a time where resources are scarce, the greenest building is one that actually already exists. And therefore, when we see our cities, we see so much, and we see our urban landscape. We are a country blessed with amazing historic architecture and historic building. Mumbai's Midlands or historic buildings across the country. And what's also interesting in our country is very often the identity of a city is inherently linked to its historic buildings. That's not just in our country, but across the world. If you're looking at London or Paris, and if you are going Europe, even from as a business destination, even the greatest business centers and across the world, the global business leaders pitch the Louvre, the Buckingham Palace, and their historic architecture to the world, and that is what brands a city. Unfortunately, in our country, we've pretty much kept that as a second, or actually a last priority. And as a result, we see, especially in towns like Calcutta, Chennai, Delhi, Mumbai, these are beautiful historic cities with the inner city, which is often the business center, is also the most historic core of architectural heritage. And therefore, it becomes incumbent on us to see how are we making sure that we are building in context. Unfortunately, in every country in India, that includes Mumbai, where I live, we have these one shoe size fit all bylaws. Our bylaws are not geared to engage with the existing architectural fabric of that place and develop something in context. We have the same FSI and the same setbacks, whether they apply to Nariman Point or they apply to Banganga. And that is the tragedy of our country, where we have actually replaced some of the most amazing historic streetscapes with glass and alupo bond facades, not because of a very strong idea of architecture, but because we've been blatantly just copying the West. So the issues that Hafiz raised about global warming and about it's basically all this ties up. We had in Rajasthan, we've had traditionally an architecture of havelis, courtyards, fretwork panels to ensure that they are both traditionally we've built with a regional understanding of local material available, using resource wisely, using solar passive architecture. And yet the kind of west-facing glass facades we are building across the country and we have in the last 20 years has been in a complete sort of almost, it's not just an ignorance, it's also a kind of, an attitude of almost an arrogant construction that has had absolutely no empathy for either heritage or the planet. And I think it's time, we've already lost time. Most of our amazing streetscapes, whether you see across Shekhavati or Rajasthan, we've replaced beautiful streetscapes with just the kind of dabba architecture that you go back to a city like Lucknow and you walk into a mall and it's got the same glass cladding and inside is the same Allen Solly and Marks and Spencer. And as children, our parents would go to Lucknow and come back with chicken and we would go and eat somewhere. And the whole idea of these amazing towns with their character that lent an identity of the town has been replaced by a cookie cutter architecture. And I think it's already perhaps too late, but it's time that we as an architectural community just got away from number crunching, from how many square foot, what FSI we can consume and how much money we can make for the client, to actually doing something that contributes to the urban landscape.
Thanks so much. Rahul, coming to you in terms of, grand projects are being planned. So do you think that 20-year plan of our cities has outlived its utility and we need to, go back to the drawing board and, start rethinking how we should build our cities?
Yeah, thanks, Devin. I definitely think so. But first, I'd like to underline a couple of points that Sonali and Hafiz have brought up. Music to my ears, both of them. And Hafiz, so glad to hear you're prioritizing public transportation over vehicles. And we've spoken about this in the past. And I'm glad to see this change of prioritizing public transportation. Just underline one thing that we had done a study a decade ago on Maharashtra and urbanization in Maharashtra and found, you gave the numbers for India, for Maharashtra, we found that about 5.5% of our land is urbanized and we have 110 million people. And if you do the math, if you have 10,000 people per square kilometer, the way, say, Singapore has or Paris has or London has, you need only 3.5% of your land mass to be urbanized. And we already had 5.5%. So you're absolutely right. It's inefficiently used. However, we also found that to house everybody in at 10,000 people per square kilometer, you need an FSI of 1 only, and you can do it in ground plus 6. You don't need to go higher than ground plus 6 to achieve this density. And therefore, you end up, and we'd done a study for the state, that you end up with much more green space, much more farming space. We also went on to what Sonali is saying, which cities should the government grow and which should they not, because they're already too dense. So Bombay, so if we take a metric of 10,000 people per square kilometer, which is really quite dense, and that's all you need. You don't need to go denser than that to occupy only 3% of the land mass and house everybody, right? So we need to stop growing Mumbai because it's unsustainable. Hafiz, what you said about water, Mumbai is unsustainable because we don't have enough water, and right now also we're getting water almost from Nasik. So we need to do what Sonali is saying the peripheral towns or the entire state, the way Germany has. Germany doesn't have any town bigger than 4 or 5 million. They're spread out. Their manufacturing is spread out. Everything is spread out. So it's sustainable. They have sustainable centers and they're smaller. So that's the big thinking we need to do. And we found there are 10 cities which have water, which have connectivity, which have industry, which the state needs to grow and give incentives for people to grow those cities and disincentivize growing of Bombay, which is already too dense. Coming to what Hafiz is passionate about, and Sonali so eloquently spoke about construction workers and where they live. You know, we are all aware, I think in most Indian cities, 50% of the people live in slums. 11 million people in Mumbai live in slums. But we don't have a mechanism to solve this problem. The only mechanism we have today is the SRA, and the SRA actually makes things 10 times worse. SRA projects have tuberculosis in them, have sanitation problems, have diarrhea problems, have all kinds of infections, because a slum is already at a density of 1 lakh people per square kilometer. A developer comes in supposedly giving free housing, but they're giving free housing and taking away their health forever, because they are now squeezed into 1/3 of the space, right? So that means from 1 lakh, they're going to 3 lakh. We're saying a sustainable density is 10,000. Now they're going to 3 lakh people per square kilometer, and it's unsustainable. You cannot have that. So we're actually making the problem much worse with the system we have. So how do you solve this problem? This mentality of giving free, I think, is the biggest hoax we have. And we as architects and urban planners who know the effects of this, who know that this is not sustainable, we are only postponing the problem, need to put a stop to it. There's enough money. I know enough people who rent a space in a slum, a 10 feet by 10 feet space with a common dirty toilet, and they're paying 10,000 rupees a month to rent that silly space, an unhygienic space, because there's no other space available. So people have money. You can get a 30-year loan, pay an EMI of 6,000 and afford a 350 square feet house you can build yourself. So if a community comes together and rebuilds themselves, right, it's much more sustainable. You can do everything in ground plus 5, have great open spaces, great ventilation, save energy, all of that, and stay at a density that's sustainable rather than going to the density that are not sustainable hygienically. I mean, you need air at the end of the day. You need daylight at the end. You go to some of the SRA projects, there is no daylight in the house because these are 30-story buildings with a 6-meter gap. Not sustainable. Human beings aren't designed to live like that. We are biophilic. We need light. We need air. So we have to rethink how we solve these problems. SRA is a failure, complete failure. What we were supposed to do in 10 years, we have not done in 23. And this method to try to solve the problem is going to take us another 150 years and only make it worse. So as planners, we need to think about how you solve the sum problem, and self-development is the only way to make it sustainable. Yes, and the only way not to waste, because what we are doing today is we are building these buildings which we're going to have to break in 10 years, because we're going to find the amount of crime, the amount of sickness in these buildings is so high that we're going to have to break them. So sorry about the absolute rant on the SRA, but we are in a completely wrong direction. Sorry.
Yeah, if I may just say something to add to what is really such an important point. I think the problem in our country is that, maybe earlier the 30 years ahead, just plan for years knowing that. And post-independence, we've planned for less than 5 years because the government knows it's going to be up for elections and then there'll be a election code. So we have only as a nation been planning short-term quick fix, thuk patti se jaldi kar do kind of an approach. And the whole planning process, good architects have been and good practitioners have either not disengaged with it or it's been left to sarkari babus. So I would really feel that it is time that we as a community started engaging more with these planning issues, because these are core planning issues, housing policies, urban policies. And I would really urge at least the ones in Mumbai, if nothing else, Rahul, Afiz, that we should really engage with such issues of policy related to housing, urban development, transport. Do like these brainstormers between at least in one city, if we have enough of a critical mass, and actually put a white paper where we suggest it, rather than all of us work in our individual silos and be working on individual projects. I think it's really now reached a time where, as Sonali said, it's critical that we are the community and we are the ones
Yeah.
who are
No, I
working on
think
the blood of
I
our
I
we
think
have
we are
blood
all
on
of
our
us
hands as a
doing this.
community.
No, we all of us are doing this. We are involved with the policies. We try, we meet the government official, but you're right, we need to do it together. Coming back to Debin's question about the 20-year plans and whether it's an outdated mode of thinking. So the Urban Development Act was actually made in 1967 and it's not been modified since 1967, right? So the process of planning and what we do, these master plans that we come up with, none of them have worked. All land use plans have actually failed. None of them have achieved their goals. So anyone will say, okay, so the definition of insanity, right? Continuing to do the same things when and expecting the result to be different. So we've been continuing to make the 20-year plans, which have never worked. So what I suggest is the following, that firstly, we need an urban transportation authority. None of our cities have one authority which deals with transportation as a whole, from the footpath to the bus stop, to the roads, to the train station, to the metros, to the local trains, connecting everything up. Delhi has it. That's fantastic. But do they have the authority to actually financially plan? Because Bombay has it, but it's toothless. It doesn't do anything.
Well, Delhi has it. They do a lot of work. I mean, how progressive the work is, that's a question. But Delhi has UTPAC.
Okay. So I think that is one thing that needs to happen. The other thing is that we need to actually have neighborhood plans. And we need to be involved in the budget of the city. There are 1,500 cities now where citizens contribute to 30% of the budget. 30% of the budget comes from ideas from the citizens. In Mumbai, we don't even know who makes the budget and why they make the budget and where they're allocating the money to. So it needs to come down to citizens participating, a mechanism where citizens groups in neighborhoods are asked, what is important for you? You prioritize them, and that gets put in the budget. That is a way to incrementally improve a neighborhood. Neighborhoods that don't have a market, neighborhoods that want to preserve a particular building, neighborhood that has lots of slums, how to deal with that. So if everybody comes together in the neighborhood and improves it, and so this needs to be cycles that we need to have. It needs to be much more short term so that you can modify it as you go. 20-year plans, nobody pays attention. And nobody is, if you don't monitor a plan, nothing will happen. So we need to have a much shorter cycle of neighborhood improvement schemes in totality. That's what I feel. So have a set of principles that every neighborhood should have these minimum standards, then see how to achieve that for the neighborhood and give neighborhood groups the power to decide and the money to actually spend. We have Panchayati Raj in the village, but you don't have it for urban neighborhoods. Why can't we control the budgets for the city and for the neighborhood that we have? So I see that is what has to change. And land use, having a grand land use plan doesn't make any sense. And we know that a land use plan is what has created all our transportation problems, where you say everybody will work here, everybody will live here, the school will be there, then everybody has to move from X part. Sonali is talking about mixed use, decentralizing and having mixed use. You work where you live. So those are the kinds of things we need to adopt and have, and stop this land use thing. It doesn't make any sense anymore. Mixed use is what we have to have, and incrementally improve the neighborhoods.
Thanks, Rahul. I quickly move to Ankur. The question is, can our practice of architecture and the way the buildings are being created or aligned to set the shared values that are much larger than just the client or the business, or not just be limited by the immediate need of the building itself? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Hi. So I think it's already emerging, and it's so nice to hear all of us are kind of, talking about similar concerns and what needs to be done at a common platform. And probably that was the question I was trying to ask, that is there something as a larger design community we can frame together where it's a set of values that all of us are working towards, which helps us kind of get closer to the challenges that we are talking about. And I'll just keep picking up threads from what all of you have said, what Hafiz has spoken about, what Sonali has spoken about, what Rahul, you were speaking about, and Abha. Like in some way, like for example, even this idea of decentralization, we've started looking at it. If I pick up thermal comfort, and can we look at our thermal comfort standards getting decentralized? Can they be regionally looked at rather than parameters which are centrally established? I mean, that's something that we've been experimenting with, and we think that there's a lot of value that can be brought in, more in terms of the manner in which we build and then the energy consumption around it. That there's always a story that gets embedded in the way we build, the way the whole process goes through. So in that sense, we have the opportunity, like Deben, what you spoke about, to become an influencer, to create something that's aspirational for people who are experiencing the buildings, who are becoming, like you spoke of, Rahul, you spoke about the idea of community engagement in the build process itself. And those larger ideas, when we can zoom out and actually rebuild the brief, even when the client comes with a brief which is probably fairly specific, or it's more inward looking, and can we expand it, and can we look at larger ideas getting kind of framed, reframed, and tackled in the process. Like for example, just one example I wanted to pick up was this idea of, we have so much heritage of craft, and I know it's also become a thing to do to work with craft, but somewhere it kind of ties back to what Sonali spoke about, the migration issue. And we need to find this balance between mechanized ways of construction, which are more mundane. And in that sense, we are losing the skills of our people. There's so much skill in terms of handwork that we have, and that's getting lost. So is there a way we bring it back in? And in one of the recent projects for Orissa government, we kind of try to push the state becoming a patron to bring in hundreds of craftsmen to the site and actually engage them in the process of construction. And there's a lot of work that we do in adaptive reuse, which, Abha, what you were speaking about, like this whole idea of a built structure already being, like, if you start using that, that's a green approach. And that is really exciting in our country. There's so much urban space that's getting kind of wasted or not being kind of repurposed and reused in an interesting way, which is aspirational. So again, how can we use these ideas of sustainability, and rather than looking at them as just practical solutions, can we also add this layer of aesthetics and programming such that they become more aspirational and they kind of get woven into the fabric of the way we practice architecture? So these are thoughts I had on the conversation.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And I think there's one question which most of the audience would love to hear from all of you. And I'll start with these. In light of new work styles that has evolved for architects with regard to virtual working, what is the change in work style for us going forward from here?
Should I? Hafiz is going.
It's all nice to talk, work from home and all of that. I don't believe that that is going to work because some people are conscientious and they work from home. Others are just sitting and whiling away their time. Whatever we could do in the office in 5 minutes and 10 minutes, over here we are taking hours. And I'm not the one who will just like to say, oh, this is a new thing and, it's good for working. Yes, if you're working from home, yes, you can have your home cooked food and those kind of things are very, very good. But otherwise, uh, uh, you have to supervise what the people are doing. You have to push the people. You have to pull the people. You have to instruct them. And if you cannot do that, and if that doesn't happen, it won't happen. It's just nice to talk, okay? And I don't believe that that's going to work. It is going to change, and it'll come to you have to sit at a place, you have to direct, you have to push the guys, and you have to give them time limits and everything. Over here, oh, the phone was not working, the electricity was not there, this, that. You can't leave loopholes for performance. If you leave loopholes, the guy is going to point out and say, oh, this happened, that happened, and because of that, it did not happen. You're sitting in the office, and I say, I want it in so much time. If it doesn't produce in that much time, I say, damn it, I would like to use some words, okay? And then only work will happen. Yeah. Otherwise, just, okay. I don't believe in that.
Devin, I'd like to share. Sure. One of the interesting realizations I had during the, I think we were in total lockdown till 4th of May. And one thing I realized, all my life I said that I'm a workaholic architect. Otherwise, मैं ये भी कर लेती, मेरा घर और सुंदर होता, मेरा खाना और अच्छा होता, my kids would have had more attention, this, that. 2 months of that, and I realized absolutely not. My whole life is about being a workaholic architect. I hate everything about housekeeping, cooking, home cooked food. I hate everything. Okay, so I got clarity on exactly what I was supposed to be, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. No longer regrets what I missed out by being a workaholic architect. So that's one cool realization I had. I'm more in sync with no regrets about what I missed out. The other thing is our profession is a collaborative. And it's not one, it is no longer one where grandmaster, at least I don't see myself as a grandmaster that makes one doodle and then somebody else. It doesn't work like that. It's our work, our nature of our profession is it's like trying to talk your idea over the other guy's head, and then making a sketch and scribbling on top of somebody else's sketch, saying, no, not like this, like that, no, whatever. So, and then also so many times, like literally, I have a habit of sitting behind somebody else's computer. Like I do a lot of backseat driving, in the studio. So, otherwise, if that wasn't the case, why do I need to go to my office in Mumbai? And why did I ever need to go to Bangalore? It's not that I love getting up in the morning and going off on a flight, but that energy that comes from working with your colleagues is not replaceable. It's not replaceable by Zoom. Now your turn, now you shut, now you speak, now mic off, mic on. It's just not replaceable. Some professions it might work. I think ours it doesn't at all. I think where it has helped is sometimes in coordination meetings where you were calling 10 consultants to your office to do like some tiny little coordination, where I think some of those aspects of work have really improved. Getting pre-reads before meetings has really helped sometimes formulate your entire agenda of how the meeting will go on. So I think some things have benefited, but by and large, our profession, this is not sustainable.
Ankur, you wanted to say something. You are on mute.
Ankur, mute.
You are on mute.
Sorry. So I was saying I would vouch for what Sonal is saying. We all kind of, as soon as we came out of the lockdown, during the lockdown, it was very difficult to sense what was wrong, like in the way we were working. Things were getting done. And I mean, to that extent, we were pleasantly surprised. There was a lot of commitment and a lot of rigor people brought in, especially during the lockdown, and things were getting done. But that sense of energy transfer and buzz that we all enjoy, and the kind of collaborative effort it takes to create innovation and create the kind of work that we're doing was missing for all of us. And we kind of all wanted to get back to work as soon as possible, just for that, just to be with each other and be around and like sketch together on sheets and work together. So I think that is super important for us as well. What it really brought out clearly was some conversations around loss of time. Like, for example, we used to never respect each other's time that much. I think that we learned because we had to set up Zoom meetings. So now we got focus time to get some stuff done, which had to be done individually. Meetings became very precise. Like Sonal said, there was a certain agenda which was set out, and we used to try and we now are much better at getting things done in meetings. And there is a certain amount of flexibility, I think, across the entire team, a sense of freedom where, if you need to kind of plug out and somebody needs to plug in, there's a lot more easier way of working where you could come in on a Zoom call and just be part of the critical part and otherwise handle what you have to handle. So the breakdowns have come down as a larger group.
Rahul?
Yeah, so I'm kind of the contrarian over here. We had, we've been working using Scrum. I don't know if you're familiar with Scrum, using the software world. So we've been using Scrum now for 3 years. And what we found is that because the systems were already set and working, we could very, very easily move working from home. We didn't have any of the problems Hafiz is talking about because of the system, the design process. And Hafiz, I'm more than happy to come and teach you how to do that in your teams, how to do that. You will not have to give galis to anybody ever in your life again. They will all work very happily. So it'll dramatically change, and I'm more than willing to come and talk to you about that. So because of Scrum, we found we are collaborating much better. There is much more focus in what we do. And the productivity is actually much higher. Nobody in my office wants to come back to the office. We took a poll a few months ago. We took it again, and everybody is saying we're not coming to the office.
That's something
so actually,
which, I haven't heard much. We do a lot of research on what people want to do, and I think 80% of the people want to come to the workplace. They had enough of this Zoom fatigue or Microsoft Teams fatigue, and they miss collaboration. They miss.
So Rahul, I have 2 questions to this. When you I understand that there's already team dynamics and people who know how to work with each other. What do you do about the interns who come in, who need to learn, who need to absorb, who need to understand the culture of being an architect? Okay, what do you do about youngsters who need to kind of sponge off their environment? They need to turn around and say, hey, ऐसा staircase detail कैसा होता है fire stair का बोलना. So and there is also the ethos and the value of the firm itself. I mean, Hafiz's firm has a different character from yours, from mine, from Ankur's, and people identify. In fact, for me, I'm obsessed with my workplace. For me, this is life. Okay, so for me, if I was not in my workplace, life is really diminished.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
My friends are here. My intellectual impetus comes from here. My ability to debate issues such as we are doing happens at a daily basis and happens as a chance activity. It's not planned on a Zoom. So in fact, I find that I would have, maybe I'm wrong, but this is 25 years of what I'm used to. And because my workplace forms the core of my existence, I find it extremely destabilizing. So it's not just about work efficiency. It's the mind, it's the soul. where does that engage?
So you're absolutely right. And because our teams have not grown the last 1 year and our teams are same, the social structure of the team is already there. Very few interns have come in, but you're absolutely right. If interns have to come in, how do they get socialized about the office? Who do they ask? Who's their mentor? Who's their buddy? No, none of that works. You're absolutely right there. So what I'm saying is that it's we've learned something new in working in this way. There are good things and there are bad, but I don't think it's going to remain the same. So going forward, we're going to have to merge the good parts of being together. So the way I'm envisioning the office now is that we'll actually come together when we need to work collectively, and that's not all the time. So maybe that's a couple of days a week when, depending on the team, would come together. In fact, I find meeting consultants, etc., having the whole team on a drawing rather than Zoom makes much more sense. So those kind of teams where we need to collaborate much more on a task, I think works in one place. But the individual work that a designer is doing on their own and thinking and producing something can be done and is done on their own.
Yeah, actually, I think the only reason I differ on that as well is because I find that my own energy is created by working as a sponge, sapping energy from all the youngsters around me, and learning and talking with them and finding out what did they find interesting in Ask Daily today. So I think my fears come from my own insecurity because I use my entire office as my growth mechanism personally. So I have never been a solo worker ever. So I think that's why I very vehemently believe in the collective.
So, it's very interesting. Shumul and I are working in the same space for the first time in my lives, right? She has her office and I have my own, right? And we've never worked in the same space. Now we're in the two ends of the living room, two ends of the house, and I see how she works and she sees how I work. So, and our different styles of working have come to the fore where I thought of this because, you seem to be as involved with everything the way she is. I'm the kind of person who delegates. I'm almost free by 11:30 in the morning. I'm free.
Wow.
Sab ho gaya. I can go now. I can go down to the pool and swim. I can go for a run. Till things start coming back in the afternoon and the evening. So then I have to work late to give the feedback. So the way our office works is we don't tell anybody how to do anything. We only talk about what they need to do. And we try to define that what as clearly as we can. And we leave it to the creativity of the person to come up with the solution of how. So exactly what you're saying, I want to be surprised by the youngsters, what they come up with, what ideas they'll come up with. So I delegate and then they surprise me all the time with the ideas. Sorry. Okay. Yeah,
I'm reminded of the time when we first worked around. So coming back to Hafiz, I started with Hafiz. One piece of advice for the budding architects. Okay, you're on mute, Hafiz.
Yeah, I think the world is changing. What you learned, just keep them as the basic principles. Don't just keep on doing what you have been doing and what your predecessors are doing. Think about the future. Think about the problems of future. Just don't think about problems just next to you. I felt that you were going to talk about new ways of design, why new ways of design, and what the old designs were. Learn from what the old designs were there and why they did a particular design element in that manner. There's nothing just comes about as a decoration. Why it came, learn that. And don't just do that. Now, what for the future? What for the future? The future is different. Understand the future, the need of the future, understand. And try and solve those problems. And that is the future. Don't just do things. The scope as for our profession is tremendous. We have to build a hell of a lot, and the amount of built environment that is going to come about in India is a hell of a lot. Think about that, but build in the right manner. Don't build, and the word sustainability is used very, very carelessly. Everything people are doing, they just use it sustainable. What is really sustainable? Like the old ways of just trying to save electricity and all that is not, to me, sustainable, because electricity in the future is going to be produced in a different way. To me, sustaining land is the most important thing in our life, and that is what one has to care about. Think about how you are going to sustain and use judicious land, because land is a precious commodity which cannot be produced. Everything else can be produced. Everything else can be produced. Electricity, land, water, food. That is what one has to think about. And if you think about the word sustainable, think about that. Not just electricity, not just carpet, and not just some few materials. That's just time pass. Okay, this is my advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I personally wish to express my gratitude to all of you for sharing your experiences and thoughts. I wish we had more time. Shirley kept on reminding me that we are over time. Thank you so much for your valuable inputs and sharing your experience.
Thank you, Deben. Bye, Hafiz. Bye,
Thank you,
Shirley.
everybody.
Bye,
Well, we now come to the end of a very exciting session where the key takeaway is that the A&D industry must work together as a community with the government to ensure a sustainable future. It was certainly a pleasure to have you at the Times of India's DNXT Legacy Forward, brought to you by ETH.